Nycliffe. Member for Katherine.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And yeah, there was some very interesting quotes there in that speech by the member for Nycliffe. And I'd just like to pick up on some of that commentary on the comprehensive plan. I don't know how much more comprehensive the member for Port Darwin can be. She has spoken to, she has been blue in the face on domestic and family violence and the circuit breaker and all the work that they are doing in the domestic violence space, Mr Deputy Speaker. So I don't actually think it would really matter what we said. The opposition and crossbench members obviously just don't like it. So I rise to speak on the Police Administration Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. This bill amends the Act and gives police express powers to enter premises to arrest a person without a warrant who is in breach of their parole or whose parole has been revoked. It also gives express powers for police to enter onto private property for the purpose of requiring a respondent who is subject to a domestic violence order condition which requires them to submit to an alcohol or drug test for the purpose of administering that test. Mr Deputy Speaker, this power is needed as DVOs routinely include conditions prohibiting a respondent from being in the presence of the victim or protected person or in the same location where the victim resides. Mr Deputy Speaker, the importance of this amendment bill is to strengthen the law to protect the victims when police are doing routine checks, as they can make sure the perpetrator, as I've previously stated, is not in the same house or location as the victim, and if they are, they can be charged of a breach of their bail. We have seen domestic violence here in the Territory over the last 8 years under the now opposition Labor reach crisis point and has in fact risen 82% right across the Territory. These statistics are not lost, Mr Deputy Speaker, on any of us in this parliament, as I'm sure we are all very aware of this increase in domestic violence in our own electorates. And it is the response that is the issue. In the Northern Territory, we have the worst domestic violence rates in Australia. In fact, the death by an intimate partner by homicide is 7 times the national average. I'll just let that sink in, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's 7 times the national average. In Katherine, the place I've lived for 35 years, this rate is horrendous, and last year we saw 4 women lose their life through domestic violence. The fact this was not on the front page of every paper in the nation is a crying shame. The flow and effect of these deaths in our community is horrendous. The loved ones that have lost a mother, auntie, sister, daughter, the children that this affects going on without their mother is heartbreaking, but what we didn't see under the previous Labor government was any action. And in question time, we saw today the Leader of the Opposition stand up in Parliament, and all she wanted to know was had the Chief Minister read the report, which was actually from May 2023 when the Chief Minister had a look at it, which was actually under her government, Mr Deputy Speaker. Like, this is absolutely, it's laughable, but the fact is this is not a laughing matter. This is a very serious matter that all Territorians need to be responsible for. And as a government, we are working very hard and are putting things in place to make this better. So, you know, as I said, these are the same people that were in opposition for 8 years that saw this absolutely appalling rate of domestic violence skyrocket to 82%. Through conversations I've had over my time as the member for Katherine, I hear of accommodation issues, the lack of safe spaces for predominantly women, but sometimes men suffering domestic violence. Conversations with Katherine Women's Shelter staff and staff at Quills have been concerning, and I've spoken in the House of this before, Mr Deputy Speaker. The Katherine Women's Shelter is a 25-bed facility that is at capacity. Jo, who has worked there at the centre for the last 20 years, tells the story of a 19-year-old woman, this was a few years ago, that walked into the centre after saying that her partner had pushed her. Jo was pleased to know that the woman knew that this was not okay. And this is the awareness we need in the community, not when they've been stabbed or beaten with a metal pole. 239 women in Katherine have been turned away because of capacity constraints in the last year. And Jo says if that same 19-year-old woman walked into the centre today, she would not likely be given a bed. She would be turned away because of the increase that we've seen in domestic violence that under the previous government was able to reach crisis point. Domestic violence has reached new heights, and this is nothing to be proud of. We acknowledge on the need for funding, which is what the Minister has spoken of plenty of times in this House. We need to invest in programs that deliver real change to Territorians and also start with early intervention and prevention. And we've heard Minister Carl speak of the circuit breaker program here in the House, and she has spoken of the additional $36 million ongoing funding. That's ongoing funding, Mr Deputy Speaker, for domestic violence till she is blue in the face. And that will also support the implementation of the coroner's recommendations. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is important to have continued and additional investment in services and programs that work to prevent and address domestic family sexual violence impacts. There needs to be ongoing coordination, monitoring and evaluation of the whole of government response. And the circuit breaker team that was stood up in Alice Springs late last year continues to be a priority of our government to revive and support the region. I note that Minister Carl met up with Minister Burgoyne. They met up with homeless, legal and domestic, family and sexual violence, frontline providers and workers. So whilst on the other side of the House they say we don't talk to frontline workers, Mr Deputy Speaker, the Minister clearly has stated on numerous times that she does meet with these people. As well as attending the night patrollers meeting and joining the circuit breaker night staff team in action on the streets while she was in Alice Springs. On the 7th of March in Katherine, we had the first of many meetings of the Katherine local patrollers in a new initiative to have a more coordinated response, which is what they've been doing in Alice Springs, to crime and antisocial behaviour. I commend the Katherine Police, Territory Housing, Kalano Patrol and the circuit breaker team in working together for working towards better solutions and agencies working together for the prevention of crime and domestic violence. Each night, the police tip out litres and litres of alcohol. Now, this is money that could be spent on rent or food for families. It is through this initiative that early intervention takes place. A youth that is out on the streets and picked up by police is followed up the next day with children and families. Conversations are had with the family, and from there, conversations can be followed up with either education, health, and other relevant agencies. We'll be not dishing out funding to services that were clearly not working again and again, and the Minister has been very clear about that. We have over 35 not-for-profits in Katherine, all receiving funding from the Northern Territory Government or Federal Government, sometimes both, and yet we have not seen much relief in any of the rates of homelessness or domestic violence in our town. So that's where the Minister has said that she will not be continuing to fund things that do not work. There needs to be evaluation and supports going into the right areas, and this is why this amendment supporting the police is a step in the right direction. Since we've been elected in almost 8 months, we have done more than the previous Labor government did in 8 years. We have brought our reducing crime package in the first sittings after being elected. We've brought in Declan's Law, given police more powers for wanting operations, strengthened bail laws, ram raid legislation, public drinking is now an offence, and we've lowered the age of criminal responsibility. So we back in our police, Mr Deputy Speaker, on this side, and we will not shy away from representing Territorians. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, we were elected on a mandate of reducing crime, rebuilding the economy and restoring our lifestyle. And I commend this bill to the House.
Thank you, Member for Katherine